Hello, folks. My name is Rob Von Bernewitz. I'm a Long Island historian. I am the vice president of the Davistown Meeting House in Coram, which is a 1740 farmhouse that turned into the center of government for the town of Brookhaven because it was centrally located. So Setauket was formed the first settlement was in Setauket and Brookhaven. And when people started moving to the South Shore, they didn't want to go all the way to Setauket to do business. So they wanted to centrally locate the town meeting, and that's where it took place. And we restored the house, and now it's a museum, open the second Sunday of every month. I am also the cemetery chair for the Three Village Historical Society in Setauket, which is a wonderful organization that handles the Setauket, Stony Brook, and Poquat areas. Lots of history there. We're going to learn about some of it tonight. And I'm also the president of Long Island Cemetery Preservation Group, which is a group that was a nonprofit group. We go around restoring all historic graveyards one at a time. Right now we're working in Suffolk, but we have bigger plans to come to Nassau someday. But we've restored approximately 10 of them already. And I kind of got interested in cemeteries from all my historical endeavors. I got involved with this in the first place because I worked for the phone company and I installed phone systems. So I went all throughout Nassau County and Suffolk County to various towns like Hempstead. I've worked a lot here, Roslyn, and I just took an interest in the old structures that I was looking at. So from that, I hooked up with some historical societies, and that led me to the early settlers of every area has a historic cemetery of the people who settled there first. And it's fascinating, and you have to keep that history alive because a lot of times that's the only record of people that lived there. The paper records have been lost. So we take graves and we restore them and document them and photograph them and catalog them all across Long Island. So that's what I do. So tonight we're going to learn about some of the types of cemeteries on Long Island, some of the famous people or noteworthy people that are buried on Long Island, and some of the symbolism that you'll find in these graveyards. So what we'll look at first is the types of burial sites on Long Island. I always start with this one because it's very, very important, and it was here long before the settlers came, and that's the Native American burial site in Montauk. It's very historic. It's the Montauk Indians or Native Americans, and it's nothing but field stones because that's all they had at the time to mark to use as grave markers. We weren't importing stones yet, or the settlers weren't even here yet. These predate them, and there's it's an extremely sacred site, and you get such a wonderful feeling just standing out over it and look at it. There are circular patterns. Stephen Talkhouse, who was one of the last descendants of the great Sachem Wyandanch of Long Island, is buried in this site as well. So he made it through the late 1800s, and there's a photograph of him, and he was from that area. The Setauket Presbyterian Church in Southold, the Southold Presbyterian Church, is the oldest colonial burial ground in New York State, period. It has the oldest stone in New York State, and there's over 20 stones from the 1600s there. So Southold and Southampton were settled approximately the same time, 1640, and depending on which historian you talk to, Southampton will say, they came here first, and Southold will say, no, they came to Southold first. But we're gonna go with Southold because they have the oldest graveyard. On the west side of town, in the New York City area, the Dutch settled there. So there are some preserved examples of Dutch colonial burial grounds in New York City. Now, there may have been older ones than the one in Southold, but they were lost to progress and expansion. So, but this particular one in Flatbush is very, very nice. Most of the stones there have Dutch names, Van something and Van Sicklen, and it's a very nicely preserved example of a Dutch burial ground. All across Long Island, you'll find small family burial plots, usually associated with their homestead or farm. If you go from Ridge on Middle Country Road, Jericho Turnpike as they call it out here, basically every mile there's a graveyard, whether it's a church graveyard or a family graveyard behind somebody's house. There's just a lot of them. And some of them are landlocked and they're difficult to find. And that's what I do. I go out and find them. This one was near my house, so I knew where it was. But again, it's behind somebody's house. Here's one in the Elmont area, which is fairly close to here. It's an interesting family plot, looking at it from the plot owner's perspective. It's his brother, it's his mother, it's his father. So the person on that cross it's from his perspective. And that's in Belmont or Elmont over here. Cavalry Cemetery in Queens is the largest cemetery in the United States as far as burials. There's 3 million people buried there, and it's still active. So Long Island, or even though it's Queens, has the distinction of having the largest cemetery in the country, and that's Cavalry Cemetery. We have approximately, probably around a dozen Quaker cemeteries across Long Island. There's some in Bethpage, there's one in Wantaw, Flushing has one, there's one on Shelter Island, Jericho, this one here. And you'll notice that all the gravestones basically look the same because the Quakers don't believe in class structure when they bury their loved ones. So everybody has the same, no matter how much money you had, everybody gets the same treatment when they pass.
Where is that? Is that near the main Maiden?
It is.
But isn't there another Quaker? There's only one Quaker cemetery?
No. In Jericho, this is the one. There's one in Matinacock, which is the Friends Academy, which has this very, very similar look to it. And the one in Bethpage also looks like this. They all kind of look the same. It's on 106. It's on 106, 107, like right by Jericho Turnpike.
But it's gone now. It's something. It's like Opus Steakhouse or something.
Well, yeah, I think it did change names.
Yeah.
Here's an example of an African American burial site that was left unkempt for a while, and now the Friends Academy helped clean it up. And there's Civil War veterans and all kinds of historic people buried there. So now it gets the love and honor that it deserves. And it's very nicely maintained now. Cypress Hills National Cemetery. It was the first national cemetery on Long Island. There is now 3 of them. We have Cypress Hills, which is full now. We have Long Island National Cemetery, which is by Pine Lawn. That's filling up. And now we have one in Calverton. And Calverton also has a major distinction. It's the biggest cemetery in the country, land-wise, size-wise, area-wise. So we have the largest in Queens for internment, and we have the largest in the country area-wise, which is Calverton National Cemetery. This is an example. Come on in. This is an example of a potter's field. Now, a potter's field is a place for unfortunate people who have no money, or maybe vagrants that they don't know who they were, or this particular one is associated with the Kings Park State Hospital, which has a past that is shady at best. And this cemetery was moved from another site, and they just randomly dug up the bodies, placed them in areas. Nobody knows who's here. The records are lost, and it's a shame, but it is the patients from Kings Park State Hospital. Another problem with this picture is cemetery and trespassing are both spelled wrong on the sign. So it just doesn't get any recognition and things, and it's just the way it is.
How many bodies do they think are?
Probably about 1,000.
Oh, but no headstones?
No headstones.
Nothing.
A couple of, memorial headstones. But there is also another one on the grounds of Kings Park State Hospital that has a few headstones, flat ones. Now we have Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. It's a wonderful cemetery that was formed because the churchyards in Manhattan were filling up. There was no more room, expansion with all the immigration that was going on. And people thought that some of the diseases were caused from cemeteries. So they wanted to move them out to the rural sticks, Brooklyn, at the time. So a bunch of gentlemen got together, purchased this land, and created a cemetery for profit. You pay for a plot there based on the location in the cemetery. So if you want to be next to specimen trees, you're going to pay more. If you want to be next to overlooking lovely lakes, you're going to pay more. If you want to build a big mausoleum, you're going to pay more. But Greenwood has everything. So even a person of modest means can get their standard headstone, and there's still lots of burials going on today. And it was also the site of the Battle of Long Island during the Revolution. The highest point in Brooklyn. They do. Yep. Here's an example of a Jewish cemetery out in East Hampton. The Jewish people have lots and lots of cemeteries on Long Island. The whole Cypress Hills complex is massive with cemeteries. It's one after the other of all denominations.
That's what non-secular means.
Right, that's what non-secular means, yeah. And this is an example out just past Sag Harbor. All Faith Cemetery in Maspeth, another beautiful cemetery. It has monuments 50 feet high with statues on them, massive. The Victorian era cemeteries are beautiful. There's a lot of changes that went through with symbolism, and we're going to see that in a minute. But that one in the back left there has to be at least 50 feet high. This is an example of an enslaved person's burial ground out in Orient Point on the North Fork. There's a little controversy about this one at the moment. They did ground penetrating radar there and it came up inconclusive, so they didn't find anything. And the cemetery is kind of facing in the wrong direction. Colonial cemeteries always face east, or 99% of them face east for religious reasons, because the sun rises in the east and they're facing in that direction. This is faced to the south. So right now we don't know if it actually is a cemetery or not, but I'll leave it at that.
The two headstones in the back there.
Yeah. That could be a family burial plot with just field stones. It's still being looked at. I can't give a definite answer about it. And of course, you have to have a place for your pets. So we have numerous pet cemeteries along Long Island. There's one big one in Wantaw. And out in the Hamptons, you have Bidewees, and this particular one's in Middle Island. And there's Kitty's Corner. Here's some of the types of gravestones that you'll find on Long Island and grave markers. I pulled this one up because this is a very, very old graveyard in Southampton. Now, when the first settlers came to Long Island, their main concern was survival. So a lot of people didn't have the means to import stones from New England, because that's where we got all of our headstones from. Connecticut, Boston, and Vermont. So you see in this area here, this has some headstones from the 1600s in it, so it is extremely old. But there's a lot of open area there. And back in those times, they used wooden markers with signs to put the name on them, and they deteriorate over time. So ground penetrating radar was done here, and they found 900 bodies in the open spaces. So we know that there are a lot of early settlers there. When you don't have those means, a lot of times you'll grab the nearest rock and carve initials in it and a death date. So field stones are found all over Long Island, especially African-American sites, because of the issues that we had in the colonial days. Their burials are marked with field stones. And I just visited a very, very extremely important site, African-American site, on Lloyd's Neck, which features the very first African-American poet buried there. And it's now in the process of being restored and getting the love that it deserves. I mentioned the Southold Presbyterian Church. This is the oldest stone grave marker on Long Island, period. It dates back to 1671, which makes it the oldest. It's called a box tomb because it's above ground, even though the burial is below ground. It looks like a box tomb. And the slab on the top is thick and heavy, so it was extremely expensive to import this here. So this person was a person of well means back in the colonial days. And your basic headstone looks like a three-lobed carving. The general consensus is why they look like that is because it resembles a headboard. And back in the colonial days, there was two parts to a burial. There was the headboard and a footstone. The footstone just had the initials on it, so it was like a bed, a final resting place. That's why they're shaped like this. And this one dates back, the person was born in 1650. It's very old. These are called tabletop graves for obvious reasons. They look like tables. Again, there's probably maybe 20 of them across Long Island in various locations.
And the bodies is underground.
The bodies are underground. But it's a status symbol because it's very, very heavy and very, very expensive to import. And the person usually, and there's usually plaques associated with them on the top. These particular markers came out in the late 1800s from a company in Bridgeport. They've made a way of making a zinc composite. So they marketed themselves as, these are very light. So you could design your own stone out of a catalog with the various plates on there. You could change your plates, whatever symbol you wanted to put on, you just screwed it in. So they came out with this product and they put a real hurting on the stone quarries because they were right. It was cheaper to ship and it lasted longer. It stands the test of time. Acid rain doesn't really damage it. The problem, the unfortunate thing was World War I happened and they needed the materials for the war effort. So it put them out of business. Here's Salem Fields is in the Cypress Hills complex. This particular area is Mausoleum Row, one gigantic mausoleum after the other. Very, very interesting site. It's a place worth visiting. Yes, yep. And this is a community mausoleum in Pine Lawn Cemetery. Inside you have fountains and nice couches to sit on to reflect on your loved ones. It's a modern indoor mausoleum. We have things called crypts across Long Island. They're not that common, but they're around. If you find a hilly area, crypts are underground. You have them at Greenwood. This particular one is in Cypress Hills. That's the Jackie Robinson Parkway, right by the side of it. The people, unfortunately, have a good night. Unfortunately, the people that were in the way of the Jackie Robinson Parkway are under the Jackie Robinson Parkway. So they didn't move everybody.
But they straightened out the Interborough years ago, right? And they had to move the bodies there.
Some of them were moved, yeah,
Well,
not all of them.
so they just paved over them?
In New York City, it happened quite often. There's graveyards under parking lots. Bryant Park is a graveyard. And Madison Square Park is also a graveyard. There were burials there. They turned them into parks.
Not parking lots, huh?
Parking lots too. There's parking lots. It's unfortunate. You know, people look the other way and progress happened and
Money under the table, I guess.
it happens.
Anything, right?
Out in Suffolk County, where I'm from, there's stones in the middle of the woods. When the developer sells the land, where'd the stones go? You know, they just disappear. Doesn't happen all that often, but it happens. This particular tomb is Lion Gardner's tomb. There's a big island out on the east end called Gardner's Island. He's one of the very, very first settlers that came to the Long Island area. His family made this tomb for him about 100 years after his death. It has a knight in full armor protected over on a sarcophagus. Back to Greenwood. This guy wanted to make his burial site look like a pyramid. It's a crypt. It is underground, and he has nice statues with a sphinx. And obelisks. In the mid-1800s, this is of Egyptian origin. These started popping up in Victorian graveyards. They're very, very expensive, and they're usually a sign of power. And these particular monuments here in Sag Harbor are associated with the maritime industry because there was a lot of ship captains and a lot of seafaring activity out there. So the one on the right is broken at the top, and it wasn't broken it wasn't broken on purpose. It was set that way because it's a symbol of life cut short. And people can just put a boulder there, carve the name in it. That's another type of burial marker. These are the modern markers that you see today. They're laser etched in granite. Granite is the choice of stone today. It lasts forever. As far as the etching, I don't know. It's not really that deep into the granite, so we don't know how it will stand the test of time. Another type of modern memorial, which is 3D. It has a birch tree in 3D and cardinals on a branch. Now we have military issue monuments for our veterans. If you can prove that your person was in the Revolution, or even today the burials have are specific issues, but if you can prove that you were in the Revolution by either pension papers or signs of association, they will issue another stone, a government-issued stone, and their standard of releases. These particular markers are that zinc marker. They got the Civil War contract for a while, so they were producing Civil War memorials, which these two are. The problem with it is they had to make a form for it, so it was too expensive to make individual names on all these markers. They couldn't standardize it. Each one had to have its own form, so it wasn't really feasible to continue. And then you have brass markers, like this one in Elmont, World War I veteran. This particular gentleman didn't have a whole lot to say. On his epitaph, it says, "No comment." I guess he didn't really want to say too much.
What's the number?
I'm pretty sure that it's some type of military number. So I'm guessing he was in the Navy.
Yeah, because you have this chef.
Yeah.
It's gotta have some representation.
Right. And then over here, we have a wonderful Civil War monument installed by the Grand Army Republic in the late 1800s. Here's some of the symbolism that you'll find on gravestones. in the very, very early days, the Puritans brought over an art form that is now specifically an American art form and one of the very, very earliest art forms in America. It's called stone carving, and you show signs. This is called the death head. You'll see these out in colonial graveyards. They're very sinister looking. It's a reminder to you that your time on earth is short, so you better behave yourself and you better be good to your churches. And wonderful, wonderful examples of all different kinds of styles came out of this art form. And there began to be competitions with the stone carvers up in New England, and there's probably 300 of them at one time. So you had choices. You had choices of material. This is a slate. You had choices of brownstone or marble. So whenever you look at a colonial burial site on Long Island, you're looking at early colonial commerce, because that's what people purchased. And we don't have any records. There's very, very few records of the price of headstones and the cost and even some of the carvers. So this is it. Here's another example. It's got crossbones on top of it, skull and crossbones. This is one of my favorites. It's got 3 different death symbols on one stone. It's got pickaxes and shovel, a death head, and crossbones all on one stone. This was out in Southold Presbyterian Church. And they got quite elaborate as they went along. They eventually got away from the sinister skeleton head, and they started rounding out the features, and attitudes towards death changed. And they, instead of having, flying out of here quickly up to heaven, they made it more human-like, and they called it a soul effigy. And they still had wings. We'll get to this in a second. This one's by the Glen Cove Mansion, the Wolseley family, very, very wealthy family. They probably had this one made for them, and they probably paid a pretty penny for it. And the family cemetery has lots of examples of this type of symbolism. This guy was probably in the military as well. Here's some of the soul effigies I was telling you about. They rounded out the skeleton head and they made it more human-like. It still has wings that brings the soul up into heaven, and it has crowns of creation, they call it, elaborate crowns, and all different types and varieties of these stones from the artist appeared. This guy's got kind of a hat-looking thing on. This one has the wings. And this one is over here in the Grace Presbyterian Church in Jamaica, which is also a wonderfully preserved graveyard. Now, these symbols and carvers, as the 1700s progressed, some of the carvers started importing stones from New Jersey and Westchester. So we would get we get a new type of artistry. This particular stone is from that area. It's not from New England. So these New Jersey and Westchester carvers made it all the way out to the east end of Long Island in some rare examples, and some of the New England carvers made it all the way into Brooklyn and Manhattan. So they did travel quite a ways, and they did cross over territories, probably because the families liked those particular artists, stone artists. Chubby-faced cherub, just another example of an artist's rendition. And then it got to the pinnacle, right about when they started to disappear. The most elaborate, ornate stones were being produced. Some of these symbols, we don't even know what they are. They could be from outer space. But the side finials and the elaborate carvings and the curvatures and floral arrangements, just amazing. Right about 1850, all of those soul effigies and death heads disappeared. There's always an ongoing changing attitude in religion. So at this point, the soul became an urn, And you'll see, like in cemeteries across Long Island, you'll see urns on top of statues, on top of podiums. So the urn now represented the soul. And the weeping willow tree represented weeping over that soul. So now the activity's taking place right here. It's not going off into heaven. It's taking place on ground. This is the symbol for Masons. You'll see this all over. It was a club, an organization, and you'll see this all over Long Island. Here's an anchor and a chain, usually associated with the maritime industry of some sort, but also has religious connotations. This particular person, Sarah Ann Sells, liked to smoke a corncob pipe, so she put it on her headstone. This is an African-American site in Setauket, one of the very, very first cemeteries that we restored was an African-American site. We're going to see that in a minute. And this guy said, this pretty much says it all. You know, they didn't have to say much. I'm going, I'll see you later. I'll meet you up in heaven. And at the Young's Memorial Cemetery in Oyster Bay, where Teddy Roosevelt's buried, they did ground penetrating radar and found bodies at the lower end, so they believed they might have been the faithful servants, and they marked the bodies where they found them. Okay, so it is our 250th birthday, so I changed up the presentation a little bit. The Declaration was signed in 1776, 250 years ago. So we're going to learn about some of the patriotic people on Long Island. Now, we know that the Battle of Long Island happened in Brooklyn, and we lost that battle. So for 8 long years, the people of Long Island were under occupation of the British, and it was not pretty. They took our horses, they took our food, they took our buildings to bring it to their headquarters in Staten Island and New York City, and they harassed everybody on Long Island for 8 years. So we suffered more than anybody else did in the entire revolution. And the Battle of Long Island was the biggest battle ever during the revolution. George Washington had 8,000 people there. He was outnumbered by about 30,000 British people who surrounded him from all directions. And so he was able to escape the battle because fog set in, and the winds were coming out of the north, which kept the British from coming up the East River. So overnight, they lit fires like they were still there, and they evacuated back to Manhattan, and they were able to escape. And George Washington was a master at that. He was able to hit and run these little battles from the front lines, the back lines, disrupt the supply chain, and extend the war for as long as possible until the British people at home were paying the taxes to pay for 30,000 troops. That was very expensive. So because of the length of the war, George Washington did not lose it. He didn't win it, he just didn't lose it. And when the French helped us down in the southern portion, we caught them on a peninsula because the French blockaded their ships. They couldn't get off, and Washington's troops surrounded them, and they couldn't retreat off the peninsula. So they eventually surrendered there, and that was the end of the war per se in 1981, but the occupation on Long Island still continued through 1983. So we're going to learn about some of the people who were key members during that occupation, which helped the revolutionary effort on Long Island.
No, he meant
17, I'm sorry, 17. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Abraham Woodhull is Setauket born, and he was the leader of the Long Island portion of the Culper Spy Ring. He was a farmer. He didn't want to be a spy, but the British came to his house once and harassed and beat up his father, and he didn't like that very much, and eventually turned in to be the spy leader. Now, the reason why it worked, the spy network, is because everybody knew each other. Everybody grew up in Setauket. They all went to school together, and they knew each other to keep a secret. Now, before that, Nathan Hale tried to be a spy, but he was from Connecticut, and he came over on a whaleboat, and he didn't fit in as a Long Islander. He didn't know the roads. He dressed as a school teacher, and he stuck out like a sore thumb. He got caught talking too much at an inn in the Huntington area, so they took him to Manhattan and they hung him. So that didn't work out for him. But the Long Island spy ring worked out a lot better because everybody knew each other. And this person, Abraham Lincoln, Woodhull, is buried in the Setauket Presbyterian Church, and that's his gravesite. There's a story about Selah and Anna Strong. Does anybody know about Selah and Anna Strong? Well, they lived in Setauket. They grew up in Setauket as well. And the legend has it that Anna Strong would hang her clothes on a clothesline and put a black petticoat up, and depending how many white garments were after that black petticoat was where the spies would meet when they came over from Connecticut in rowboats. Now, Setauket was full of inlets, and there was plenty of places to meet, but the British occupied Setauket, and they had to be very careful. So that's the story about Anna Smith Strong. And the Daughters of the Revolution chapter is named after her. Selah Strong had to leave. He was imprisoned once, and he was let go because somebody knew somebody. So at one time, the British imprisoned him. He wound up going to Connecticut. 30% of the population on Long Island went to Connecticut during the occupation because they would have been thrown in prison ships if they stood up for the Patriot cause. The other 30% of Long Island, mostly Nassau County and Queens, were British sympathizers. They were more on the side of the British. So the western end of Long Island was Tories, and the eastern end was more patriotic. The other 30% were indifferent. They didn't go either way. And then the Quakers were the same way. They didn't take sides either. So it was like a 30-30 split. Robert Townsend was a key member of the spy ring. He was from Oyster Bay. His family had a big importing business with a maritime shipping business. So Robert had a store in Manhattan near the British headquarters. The British would come into his store and talk about things, and he would overhear them and pass it on through the spy network, and it would get back to George Washington. Or if troops were being moved around or ships were being set sail in the Long Island Sound, the spy ring would say that the British are on the move. You know, they're going here, they're going there, they're building a fort over here. That's the type of information they were getting back to George Washington as he moved his headquarters around. So Robert Townsend was part of the spy network. Austin Rowe ran a tavern out in Setauket, so he had an excuse to go back and forth to Manhattan to get supplies for his store and tavern. That's how he could get past checkpoints on the three main thoroughfares on Long Island. You had 25A, which was the northern route. You had Jericho Turnpike, which was called Kings Highway originally, now 25. And you had the southern route, South Country Road or Merrick Boulevard, as they call it out here. So they all had checkpoints. You had to pass the British, and they would check what you have. Jonas Hawkins was also a courier. He was from the Stony Brook area. My non-for-profit group, this stone was laying on his back with grass impeding on it. He was a spy that helped us during the Revolution. So we took on our own to raise it, clean it, and straighten it out. The Rows of Port Jefferson played a key role as spies. The British were always patrolling the waters of the Long Island Sound. They called it the Devil's Belt. So the Culper Spy Network had to go back and forth to Connecticut to pass the information on and watch out for these British ships. So there was a couple of incidents where they had to hide out in John Rowe's basement. So we know he was a big help. Philip Rowe was his brother. He also had a house in Port Jefferson. Now, Colonel Josiah Smith had a militia. So before the revolution happened, when everything in Boston was happening, the Boston Massacre, the Battle of Concord and Lexington, and the Tea Party thing that happened, people around the other 13 colonies wanted to stick up for Boston, so they formed their own militia. They signed people up to form groups that would wind up participating in the battle that was sure going to happen, because they stuck up for the people of Boston, because they were blockaded, they were being harassed. So these militias formed, and Colonel Josiah Smith had one out on the South Shore. General Nathaniel Woodhull, he was from the South Shore too. At the Battle of Long Island, his job was to get the cattle out of the Hempstead Plains to safety so the British wouldn't take them. So he was understaffed, and he had maybe like a dozen people to help him. And when the British came around the back door and came in through Jamaica, they caught General Josiah Smith and they slashed his arm. And a month later, well, the story is, they say, they told him, say, God bless the king. And he said, God bless us all instead. And then they slashed him with the sword. Put him on a prison ship in Brooklyn, and he died about a week later, and his wife went and got his body and brought it back to Mastic. It's actually a very nice story, what his wife did. Women played a key role during the Revolution, too. When the men went off to fight, they had to stay back and take care of the farms and what was left and feed the children. So women played a huge role in the revolution on Long Island as well. Their story doesn't quite get as told as often as it should be. Benjamin Talmadge was the complete leader of the George Washington spy ring, so he was essentially the first CIA director ever in America. And he was from Setauket, but he wound up going to Yale. He was a child prodigy, and he never came back to Long Island apart from visiting his family. He wound up staying up there in Litchfield. And the funny story is, when I went up to see this graveyard there, it was cold. It was like 20 degrees a couple years ago. And we drive all the way up there. We got there, and it says, cemetery closed. Not for me, it wasn't. I hopped over the fence. Caleb Brewster was the whaleboat portion of it. He was a very good seaman, so he would row over undetected and participate in raids from Connecticut. There was a couple of battles on Long Island that Caleb Brewster was involved with, and he also took the messages from Setauket back to Connecticut to distribute to George Washington. He's buried right on the other side of Port Jefferson in Fairfield. So, but he didn't stray too far from home. George Smith from Smithtown played some key roles. George Washington always wanted to take New York back after he lost it, New York City. And he was thinking about doing it again as the war progressed. But George Smith said, don't do it. They got too many troops. And George Washington thought about it, and he went down south instead. And that's when they caught all the troops on the peninsula. William Floyd, he wasn't really a spy, but he signed the Declaration of Independence, and he was from William Floyd Mastic area, but he's buried upstate New York. He just should be mentioned. Other noteworthy people buried on Long Island. We have our very own president, Teddy Roosevelt. So we do have a president buried on Long Island.
Where is that cemetery?
It's right in the heart of Oyster Bay, right down by the water. They made a beautiful wildlife sanctuary next to it too. We have very important American, Jackie Robinson. He broke the color barrier in baseball, the first ever to do it. He was a Brooklyn Dodger, and he is buried in Cypress Hill Cemetery They named the parkway after him, and as you can see, people give him nice mementos, baseballs, bats. Very important American. Alonzo Chappelle. Not too many people know about him. He was an artist that painted famous Americans and famous scenes of America. So he painted the farewell address, Washington's farewell address at Fraunces Tavern, and he also painted the Battle of Long Island in Brooklyn. So his work was in textbooks in schools at the time, in elementary schools and one-room schoolhouses. That's where most of his work was seen. Extremely important artist. He painted so many important American scenes that happened. And he's buried out in Middle Island by a lake, and they named the lake Artist Lake because a lot of artists, people live there, including Alonzo Chappelle. Louis Armstrong, the great jazz musician, originally from New Orleans, basically was one of the first people to play jazz. He worked his way up to Chicago and wound up coming to New York. He lived in Queens. Right now there's a museum there in Queens, and he is buried in Flushing. Leroy Grumman. Does anybody in this room know anybody who worked for Grumman? My father retired from Grumman. He worked on the Lulu Module, and he thought nothing of it. He had all his papers, and I'm like, he's like, do you want these? I'm like, of course I want these. Anyway, Leroy Grumman was the biggest employer of Long Island for the longest time, probably the 50s all the way through the 70s. Was the largest employer on Long Island. He's buried in Locust Valley. Rufus King is buried at the Grace Church in Jamaica. There's a wonderful park right in the heart of Jamaica with Rufus King's house still standing. And so he signed the Constitution. So he's pretty important. William Sidney Mount. Has anybody ever heard of William Sidney Mount? Extremely important American artist. In the Setauket area, which is where his studio was, we had a diverse community of African Americans, colonists, and immigrants. We had a factory out there which drew the workers. William Sidney Mount was probably one of the first artists in America ever to portray African Americans in everyday life, playing music, dancing, enjoying themselves, and being a part of the community. Nobody really did that. And there's some awesome examples of his paintings in the Long Island Museum, and now they're all over the world because people finally realize how important those paintings are. So William Sidney Mount has that distinction, and he's buried right in Setauket. Samuel Morse, the inventor of the Morse code, is buried in Greenwood. Rosalie Gardner-Jones was a suffragist who was pretty much a big female troublemaker. She, her mother was not a suffragist, so her and her mother didn't see eye to eye. And she organized women to march to Albany and also march to Washington, D.C. to fight for the right to vote. And she did it. You know, she was one of the big people who set the cause for this. So her family is, first of all, she's a Gardner and a Jones. She had a lot of money. The Gardners had Gardner's Island on the East End, and the Joneses are the Jones Beach Joneses. So there was lots of money there. So she wanted to be buried in the Jones family plot, and the pastor said, no, your mother didn't want this, you know, you can't be buried here. So her friends had her ashes strewn all over the cemetery. So that's how she wound up being buried there. And then later on, she got her own monument, as you can see. Mae West, the movie star. Now, true to Mae West form, she's on the second floor in the mausoleum, so you still have to come up to see her sometime. That's my bad joke.
It's a good one.
Leonard Bernstein, the composer and conductor, buried at Greenwood. Margaret the unsinkable Molly Brown, a Titanic survivor, is right over here in Westbury, very close to here.
It's called Holywood.
Holyrood, Rood, right. And here's some grave sites around the greater Hempstead area. And I kept it kind of patriot orientated. So right up the street here, we have the wonderful St. George's Cemetery, which has Revolutionary soldiers buried in it. It was established all the way back in 1702, so it's quite old. And it's still here. We're thankful for that. So it's wonderful that the village of Hempstead has preserved that. It's good for everybody. And there's one of the Revolutionary soldiers that's buried there. Samuel Carmans. And another one is Joseph Cheeseman. So there's two with the original stones still there. It's wonderful. All the way back in the 1700s. Richard Hewlett is buried there, but he wasn't a patriot. He was a Tory. He was on the British side. So, you know, the Tories are still here on Long Island. A lot of them, when the war was over, actually went to Canada. They came back to New York, and the British government, you know, because they were going to be, you know, they lost. So they evacuated them up to Canada. And the Toronto area was mostly Tories from New England. And there's Reverend Samuel Seabury. This is a replacement stone, but he was one of the first pastors at that church. And then there's one of your chubby soul effigies right on the grounds there. There's some nicely preserved regular stones there as well. And we have a Civil War veteran that won the Medal of Honor. So the Civil War is just as important as the Revolutionary War. A lot of people from Nassau County enlisted in the Civil War and fought for the Union Army. Rockville Center Cemetery, right up the block here. You're from Rockville Center, right? I'm sure you know about this one. And it's got the established in 1791. So it's still got some age to it. Nicely preserved. And the centerpiece of the cemetery is a monument for two major shipwrecks that happened on the coast. So they made this wonderful monument there for the remembrance of these events. Unfortunately, shipwrecks were common during the maritime era. Long Island had so many coves and inlets that we did all of our commerce through shipping. So there was, unfortunately, a lot of people lost at sea, but a lot of people made a lot of money at sea too. And Reverend Mordecai Rocksmith, who they named Rockville Center after. You would know that better than me. We have a Rockville Center historian here. And here's a wonderful area of the newer section with lots of nice, colorful arts and crafts over there in the Rockville Cemetery. And while I was there, it's hard to see, but right in the middle was a piping plover.
Oh, I see him.
Now, they're shorebirds, but there he was in the middle of Rockville Cemetery. Cute little thing. And this guy, you know, probably had some issues. We know what he liked to do. Greenfield Cemetery in Uniondale. Lovely cemetery that's still active. Many, many, many Civil War soldiers buried there. I think 200. And there is the, this was established in 1842, and that's a circle with the monument there. We saw this monument earlier, and there's another view of it. It was erected in 1888 by the Grand Army Republic, which is an organization that honors Civil War soldiers. And there's Moses A. Baldwin, who was wounded in action. So He's buried right near the monument. And then there's other sections further away with Civil War areas. And they found a way to make a crypt in that flat land over in Greenfield. So they must have took a bulldozer and made this an underground crypt. I found that odd, but there it is. Beth David Cemetery. This is an example of a Jewish cemetery in the area. So we have a wonderful burial site for the Jewish community, and it's very nicely maintained and picturesque. The Jackson Cemetery in Wantor. Anybody know where that is? As you're going south on Wantor, it's right before a church, south of Southern State. There is actually a Rev War cemetery.
On Montour Avenue?
On Wantor Avenue.
Yeah.
It's kind of by the Bidaway Cemetery, the pet cemetery. It's close to it, other side of the street. It's on the east side of Wantor Avenue, going south. This cemetery, the Jackson Cemetery, if you're going south on Wantor Avenue towards Mulcahy's, it's about a mile on the left by a church, by a big church. It's kind of tucked away. You have to look for it. Anyway.
St. Francis?
I think it's a Catholic church.
Francis de Chantal, I think?
Oh,
Yeah.
And there's the Revolutionary soldier that's buried there, Thomas Jackson. And that's a view looking back towards Wantor Avenue. So I guess there's about 50 stones there. Okay, now I talked about some of the restoration projects that we did. Here's one where we took a Revolutionary War soldier's laying on his back and broken, picked it up and cleaned it. So they need that honor, you know. They served our country. This is a before shot. What the stone looked like in this African American cemetery that we restored, and there's the after. So they clean up nicely. And you have to do it before that lichen eats away at the material.
What do you use to clean it? Is it an organic kind that you spray on it? Or?
So what we do is we wet it and we take plastic scrapers. You never use anything metallic. If you ever want to clean like a family member, always get plastic scrapers. You can get them in the paint section in Home Depot. And you scrape off as much as you can with that. Then you wet it, and use a plastic brush in circular motions and scrape it. You can use water with Dawn mixed in with it. And it'll set up, and when you rinse that off, you'll be surprised at how much stuff comes off of it, just with that process, just with soap and water. Then there's an expensive, environmentally friendly chemical called D2. It's very expensive. For 5 gallons, it's $250. So you want to use it sparingly. So if you prepare everything with soap and water, you spray this stuff on, you walk away, and 6 months later, they look like they came out of the showroom.
do you have to keep reapplying, or you apply it one time and that's?
For the stones that aren't trouble stones, yes, you can just apply it one time, and it'll take care of all the And then at another African-American site, a tree came down and knocked this one over, so we grabbed the tripod and fixed it. So a 1,000-pound stone, if you have the right equipment, you just pull the chain and it lifts it right up. And then you take a couple of men and you position it, lower it back down with some epoxy. I mentioned that I'm the vice president at the Davis House. I couldn't have the person who built the Davis House looking like that, so I cleaned it myself and it came out nice. And this is a picture of the Native American and African American tribe, the Settlecott Indians. When we finished restoring that gravesite, we had a little ceremony. And that's the before picture of it, and that's the after picture.
Oh,
So the community was thrilled about it. And from this moment on, my company went through the roof as far as work. We're recognized we were on Eyewitness News last week. We're going to be in Newsday shortly. They already filmed us and they're putting it together. Suffolk County did a thing on us. So we're getting recognized for the work that we're doing. We also run cemetery tours. We have 5 scheduled in October. That's the popular time, right around Halloween. So I run a website where you can see all the activity that we're going to have. And we run school tours as well. School districts bus the children in, usually 4th graders, and we teach them about local history and about Long Island history. And it's extremely important to keep the younger generation interested in it so that the history will be preserved. And there's us with the tripod, straightening the base, lifting the stone, placing it, and there's the final product. There's a picture of our crew. We have so many volunteers now. It just grew. It's growing, growing, and growing. We have Stony Brook History Club. We have the Daughters of Revolution. We have regular people. We have student clubs. It's an amazing vibe when we work together as a team and restore history. And we go, when we're done with the day, we go, look what we did today. It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. Okay, the grand finale. Things you may run into at a cemetery. Deer. You can run into deer. You can run into turkeys. Turtles.
Oh, wow.
Now this guy was probably looking at footstones. Cats. Dogs. I got to stop here for this dog. Came out of nowhere. I'm there. This is the African American site. All of a sudden, this dog comes up and he drops a stick. All he wanted to do was play. I took the stick, threw it. He went, got it. He was like, time after. It was a great dog. Foul odors. We were working out in Aquabog, and the duck farm was right next door, and it wasn't pretty.
Is that duck farm still there?
No, it closed last year. There's no more duck farms on Long Island. That was the last one. So it recently closed. Mockingbirds, snakes. This is a cute little guy that we found at Patchogue. The smallest New York City park in the entire park system is in the middle of Calvary Cemetery. It's probably the size of this room, probably maybe half the size of this room. It's the smallest New York City park, so they got to get their equipment in there and maintain it, in the middle of Calvary Cemetery. Squirrels. Beehives. This was an active beehive in Douglaston. Bald eagles. I was in Sayville and I noticed a bunch of people with cameras like that, and I thought they were doing a movie. So I left them alone. I'm like, I came back the next day and they were back with their cameras. So I finally walked up. I go, what are you guys looking at? Like the bald eagle nest in the cell tower. So they're making a nice comeback out on Long Island now. We got a lot of bald eagles out in Suffolk County. Possums. This guy was a cute little guy. He was a baby. He wound up climbing a tree, and so he was watching us clean stones from a good vantage point. Rabbits. This was the most unusual thing I've ever seen in a cemetery. All of a sudden, there was eggplant. I'm like, what the heck is this? Somebody dropped off a pile of eggplants.
No.
So somebody said it's kind of an Italian thing with spirits, and somebody else told me it's to feed the deer. So it's one or the other.
Really?
And the first time I went to Greenwood, I'm standing there. I wasn't there for more than 10 minutes. And I see this guy walking up to me, and he's walking up. I'm like, is that really him? And sure enough, it was. He walked right past me, waved to me. It was de Blasio, the mayor. So you can run into the mayor at a cemetery. And there's our information if you want to follow our group. We're very active, and we encourage other people who might be cleaning their relatives' graveyard. You feel free to post on it. It's a community of people that like to do this, like to visit graveyards. So we have a Facebook page, Long Island Graveyards and Cemeteries. We have about 4,000 members. And Instagram, Long Island Graveyards. And our name of our company is Long Island Cemetery Restoration Group. We're a non-for-profit. And it's licemeterypreservation.com is our website. So feel free to watch it or look at it. And I hope you enjoyed it. Does anybody have any questions or anything you want to?
So interesting.
Oh, thank you.
I loved it.
Oh, thank you.
Such a great presentation.
Thanks.
Thanks for doing this.
Anybody want to share any stories or about graveyards that you might have visited or anything? Yes.
In Calvary, there's, on the stones, they have photographs.
Yes.
When did that come about? Because there's a lot.
Fairly recently.
Yeah,
Yeah, people put these oval
right.
pictures, and it's very popular now. And if it's sealed properly, it's just a way of showing what the person looked like. There's all different things going on nowadays, and but as far as the older sites, a lot of them have been vandalized. So we're trying to repair as many as we can that were broken in numerous pieces. Just last week, we found the most historic stone. I have some African-American friends that I work with in Setauket, and they're part of the Sells family, which is the early settlers out east by us. We know that it was Titus Sells' wife's stone was upright, but they were freed African Americans before slavery was even put into play. So they were landowners out in Rocky Point. There was an enclave of African Americans that owned land and were free. So this person, Titus Sells, was hit by a snowplow, and just part of it was visible. Like all we saw was like a little of the epitaph. So I got with Shitra, who was part of Settlecott Nation, and the Sells family, I got everybody's permission. I said, do you want us to get this out of the ground? And they all agreed, yes, please get it out of the ground. We want to see what kind of condition it's in. So as we unearthed it, we found all the pieces, the rest of the pieces to the stone that were underneath it. And it said Titus Sells, and it had his age, which was huge, because now we know his timeline. We know how old he was. We know when he was born, and we have all this information on it. And we wouldn't have had that if we didn't dig that headstone that was buried under the ground. So that happened 2 weeks ago, and it's just huge news. We're all thrilled about it, and we're going to put it back together and preserve it, and that's what we're doing lately. And we're working at the it's called Seaview Cemetery in Mount Sinai. It's an old it's an old cemetery that was vandalized. So we got a lot of work, but we're getting a lot of volunteers, and it's coming along nicely, and it's shaping up. So.
Have you been out to Sac Harbor?
Yeah.
I was out there. It's Amy Zion Cemetery. It's in Eastville.
I met the woman recently that runs that cemetery. Georgette is her name.
Yeah, Greer.
Georgette Greer. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I met her, and she, I've visited that cemetery, and she interacts with the state. She's like a pretty big historian out in the Sag Harbor area. And yes, I met her recently, and we discussed that particular cemetery. That has African Americans, indigenous Americans, and colonists all in the same graveyard. So it's a small graveyard, but right next to the church. Yep, that's a historic site too.
Yeah, they have an annual service out there, so I went to record the service, and I left, and I took oh, what's that up there? I saw the cemetery.
Mhm.
So I took a bunch of pictures and video.
But the main cemetery in Sag Harbor is on a big hill, kind of like Huntington.
Yeah.
And there used to be a huge steeple on the church next door. And when the hurricane of 38 came, it knocked it over and it took out a bunch of gravestones when it did that. And they're still broken, you know, they're still laying on the side. But on top of that hill, it's kind of like green wood, was where the British built the fort. And you could kind of still see the outline where the fort was on the top of the hill of that cemetery. And the same thing in the Huntington site. The British took down the Presbyterian church across the street and built a fort right on the graveyard. And they took the gravestones and made walls out of it. And so up on top of the hill in Huntington is an area with no gravestones, and that's why.
Big Green Park, right across the street from this library. That was a cemetery.
That was a cemetery. Yep. There's still a couple of stones on the west side. You can see them.
Really in Denton?
Right here. Right across the street from the library is a cemetery.
Oh, wait, okay, so I wanna share a little story. I'm Rita Langdon. My family, my 10th generation great-grandfather was Thomas Langdon, who helped found the town of Hempstead.
Oh,
So he came in around 1644. So all of my 10 great-grandfathers, whose last names were Langdon, all lived in Lynbrook for the last 370 years. I believe that my first great-grandfather is buried in Denton, and I didn't realize, my mother and I tried to get in, we couldn't get in, but if there's stones there, you think?
there are, I saw at least 3 or 4 of them on the west side, right across the street here.
Okay, we'll have to take a look.
Yeah, they don't, well, rightly so, it's a graveyard, so the people should be respected that are buried there. So they don't let the public in there that often. I don't know what the,
We have concerts.
okay,
But other than that, if there's not an event there, it stays locked.
right.
Yeah.
You'll just have to hop over.
No,
Yeah, I'll have to- yeah,
just-
you'll
give me a
just-
boost
You just
over the
call
fence.
DPW and tell me.
The Department of Public Works?
Yeah,
Oh.
Yeah, because I haven't been in there yet either. Every time I come here, it's locked, so I didn't know who to turn to.
I think the reference desk might have a summary of some of the people in there.
Oh, no, I'll
Yeah,
take a look.
ask Erica at the reference desk.
Well, I've been inspired by your work. I looked on Facebook. I only found you a few months ago. One of my contributions to the community, I'm an historian. Here's a fun fact. I'm the historian for the Post Cereal Company and the Marjorie Meriwether Post and E.F. Hutton Estate in Brookville,
Oh.
now Long Island University. So I've been documenting all the people who are in the cemeteries in Brookville.
Right.
But since COVID, I've been in the weeds, literally in Rockville Cemetery in Lynbrook, documenting, that's where all of my family are buried. That in Greenfield, but the historic Langdons are, we're all descendants of the Seamans, the Carmans, Tyrell, Hendrickson. That's one side, and then my great-grandfather's daughter married into the Willits family, and I saw you had a Willett on a grave there. And the Willits, Mary Washburn Willett owned the Milleridge Inn.
Oh.
So that's why, would have been my 9th generation great aunt.
Wow.
So-
Such a long history.
Yeah, so we have a
right?
lot. So my contribution though, because I have to like rein it in, because it's a lot of work, I've been spending time at Rockville Cemetery just trying to catalog, because the records were burned as to the people who were there, and I see that some of our gravestones are broken,
Right.
like Sarah Langdon's broken. And then I went to, this past summer, to the New York Public Library, and they had PDFs of many of the graves that you can't even see today. So I've been compiling a list, a taxonomy of all of the folks. I'm gonna post it at some point. I'm gonna create a website, because otherwise we're gonna lose the history of that historic part of that cemetery in Rockville Cemetery.
You know, a descendant of the Smith family in Suffolk County contacted me, and she lived in Georgia. So we did a joint venture project, like long distance. And, she's a 10th generation as well. And we came out with something like this. It was a mapping project of the cemetery. We have little bios of, and the layout and pictures of each stone.
Oh, that's amazing.
So, I was very thrilled with this. And so she came up from Georgia, and we had an event like this, out in Suffolk. It was well attended, and just a very nice evening. And just hot off the presses, we just finished this 2 weeks ago, another mapping project, but this was out in Manorville. Same deal. It's a historical layout and bios and pictures of the stones.
I've been there with my mother, and Tom here is my co-researcher. I only met him during COVID, and we had a mutual love for cemeteries, so we've been to the Greenwood Cemetery. And
You guys are my kind of people.
yeah, yeah. So when I found you, we all are, and so that's what I do. I don't have anyone to help me, with the stones. We met George, who's the keeper in the Rockville Cemetery, the groundsman. He's been there for like 40 years, but other than that, it's not preserved.
I have D2. I attended a actual private cemetery cleaning that it's usually locked, but Howard Kroplik, who was the town historian in North Hempstead.
Yeah, I know of him.
Yeah, he had gotten Jonathan Appel, who's like the big East Coast conservator for
Right.
gravestones. We had a whole afternoon. They were mostly brownstone era, and I just got completely hooked. So
It's
I have-
dangerous. I plan my family vacations around cemeteries.
Yeah, we do too. We do the same thing. Yeah.
I was saying earlier, for my birthday in March, we went up to Connecticut, and I saw the oldest gravestone in America, 1644. And then I saw the oldest gravestone with a symbol on it, 1648. And it's all around the Hartford area. And then we went up to Vermont, and Providence, Rhode Island has some amazing stones. And we went there, and that's
When they called muster in Sag Harbor, and he walked, and I calculated like
Sag
miles.
Harbor to
From
Hempstead?
Sag Harbor to the town of Hempstead.
I hate to drive.
He walked. He walked. He said it just suddenly everything was over, and he said I was never so tired when I walked that length.
it was a pleasure to meet you. Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
Such a history.
Yeah.
That's
So are you
amazing.
historian for Rockville?
No.
Are you joking? Oh, okay. Okay.
she had me going.
No, I didn't.
Do you live in, where do you?
I live in Rockville Center.
Oh, you're in Rockville Center. Because there's a lot of, so Sunrise Highway used to be called Observer Street.
Sunrise Highway?
It used to be called Observer Street in the 1800s. So I had a lot of uncles who owned taverns, because this was like a main hub from the city.
Sure, yeah.
So they were bartenders, or whatever, barbers, and, trying to think of what the other guy did. Oh, he ran a coal on Observer Street, he ran on Sunrise. Joseph Langdon, his name was, Joseph B. Langdon. He had a coal yard and a lumber yard, and he sold bicycles.
Twins.
No, I don't know if it was that one. So, anyway,
Well, anyway, keep up all the good historical work,
yeah.
and spread the word and preserve history, and it's just.